Hi everyone, I hope you're all safe and well. I've got a brand new true crime video today, and I'm really excited about this one because I've never properly looked into it until I came to make this video. I read like a really short article about it, but I knew that I needed to cover it because it is just so crazy but so frustrating at the same time. Thank you so much for all your support on the last few videos. I'm really looking forward to uploading them every single week, and I love knowing what people make of them, and I love all the messages I've been getting that people actually look forward to watching them. It just makes me dead happy. So this story's set in Russia, so a lot of the names are Russian obviously, so instead of me just apologising after every pronunciation, I'm doing a little disclaimer now that I do not speak Russian. I can't pronounce a lot of the things, but I'm gonna do my best, or sometimes I'll probably say the name once and then use an abbreviation. So let's get right into the story. In 2006 in Moscow, Russia, a woman named Larissa was found bludgeoned to death in a place called Bitsa Park. So Bitsa Park is said to be about 4 times the size of Central Park in New York, so it's absolutely massive. It's got tons of secluded woodland areas, and there's a sewage system that runs right through the park. There's a lot of like grids that lead to the sewers dotted all around the park. A few days later, a boy called Sergei turned up at the police station with his dad to report his mum missing. He was really worried because his mum just hadn't come home that day. Sergei had arrived at the apartment that he shared with his mum. I don't think his dad lived with them, but his mum had left him a note to say, "I'm going out with a friend from work, I'm going to be back later." She tried to call her son but she couldn't get through, so she left a note with her friend's number on there. But it started getting later and later, and he was growing increasingly concerned for his mum. He thought, I'm going to wait a while longer, maybe she's got caught up, and he decided to put on the telly. So as Sergei was flicking through the channels, he came across a news report that a woman had been found in Bitsa Park, and it wasn't the lady from the other day. This was a woman who'd been found that day and that night. So he decided to wait for a while longer just to see if his mum would come back. Maybe she'd been caught up, he wasn't sure, but he decided eventually to ring the number on the note. So a man picked up the phone and Sergei explained and said, "Look, my mum left me your number, have you seen her today?" And the man said, "No, I haven't seen her for months." But immediately Sergei knew that the man was lying. You see, on the note, Sergei's mum Marina had actually said, "I'm going to be going out with Sasha," or Alex. Sasha is an abbreviation for the name Alexander in Russian. So it said, "I'm going out with Sasha / Alex." And Sergei knew that Alex was Marina's friend from work. She'd often brought him up, so the fact that he was saying he hadn't seen her for the past few months was just a complete lie. He knew that they worked together and he knew this man was lying. So Marina's body had been found, and it was quite gruesome how she was left. Marina had unfortunately been found really badly bludgeoned to death with wooden stakes nailed into her skull. And in Marina's pocket there was a ticket stump for a train. So the police decided to look at all the CCTV from the metro station at that time, and sure enough they found an image of Marina with a man. Using the CCTV image, the ticket stump, the note, the name, the number, all of that pointed to a man called Alexander Pichushkin. The police actually noticed a link too between Larissa, who was the woman who was found a few days ago, and Marina. They both worked with Alex, who was this man on the CCTV. So a large group of armed officers went to Alex's apartment block. His mum opened the door and she was really confused as to why the police were at her house. The officers told Alex's mum that they wanted to question him because there was a break-in and he was a suspect, but his mum knew that this was far more serious than that. Alex was actually asleep when the police came for him, and he woke up to all the guns being pointed at him, but he just woke up really calmly and said, "Police, they must be for me." Alex completely denied the murders at first. He said he knew nothing about them, but eventually he completely admitted to them. So the police were really happy that they'd caught the killer of these 2 women, and it made sense in a weird way that he would go after people he worked with. Like, there was a pattern. They were both female. He knew both of them personally. It made sense, and now this man had been arrested. When the police were able to speak to Alex more, he admitted again to killing the 2 girls, but then he also said, "In reality, the Bitsa Park maniac is me, and I've killed 61 people." Alex was born on April the 9th, 1974, not too far from Moscow. Alex's dad left when he was really young, so Alex never really knew him. His mum remarried, and her and a new husband had a new baby, which was Alex's baby sister. They all lived in a really small apartment, so when his sister was born, Alex was moved out into the living room just to make more room for the baby. When Alex was 4, he fell backwards off a swing, and then as he tried to sit up, the swing hit him back in the head, and this damaged his frontal cortex, and his head started to protrude a little bit. When the frontal cortex is damaged, it can cause really impulsive behaviour and massive bursts of aggression. Alex was bullied in school because of the shape of his head, and then in return he was really violent towards the bullies, so it just was kind of a vicious cycle. They probably really liked the response that they were getting from him. It got way too much, so Alex's mum decided to put him into a different school for children with special needs. This really upset Alex because he never wanted to go to that school and he felt like he didn't fit in there, and it just left him being bullied more, the fact that he went to a special school, unfortunately, because kids are horrible. He was even ganged up on and had his bike stolen, and from then on he vowed that he'd never let anything like that happen to him again. All of his neighbours always described him as a really nice and polite child, and he was quite shy. He was devastated when a cat died, he loved animals, he was just a nice kid. In the parks in Russia, I'm not sure if it still happens now, but then everyone used to go to the parks to play chess. He was really good at this, and especially for his age, and his granddad noticed this and was like, he's really clever. I want him to come and live with me and I'm gonna build on this skill that he's got. So Alex lived with his granddad, they played chess together, they'd have a really nice time, they were quite close, and his granddad was like the only person who ever understood him. Alex was really good at it, and it was something for his mind to do. He wasn't being bullied while he was playing chess. It was like a little escape for him and something he could put his energy into. When Alex was 14, his granddad unfortunately passed away, which left him feeling really alone, abandoned, and his granddad was the only person who seemed to ever properly understand him and appreciate his skill, and he was just absolutely devastated. When he was a teenager, he'd still go to Bitsa Park, but this time he'd be drinking straight bottles of vodka all day and asking people to play chess with him. And the alcohol never affected how he played chess. He was still really good at it, but he was always drunk, even as a teenager. He'd take his video camera to the park and film kids playing, or even film himself bullying all the kids. There was even footage found of him grabbing a little boy from his apartment block, holding him over the balcony and saying to the boy, "You're in my power now. I'm gonna drop you and you'll fall 15 metres to your death." Alex was really starting to like being the bully and having this power over people, probably because of everything he went through as a child, being bullied himself. I'm not justifying his behaviour in any way, shape or form, but it's sad that that can sometimes happen to people. Alex had a dog who he'd take to the park as well with him, and unfortunately the dog passed away as well, which just left him again absolutely devastated. He'd lost his granddad, he'd lost his dog, he was really upset. He spoke about this years later, saying that the dog's death was his fault and that he treated it badly, but other reports say that he loved animals, so I'm not sure if he loved animals early on in his life and then maybe when his granddad died and he got a bit older and started drinking that changed and he might have been cruel to this dog. Psychiatrist at this point actually told his mum that he had psychotic tendencies, and his mum just wouldn't really have any of it. She wasn't being exactly like arrogant about it, she just didn't believe that his son was capable of doing anything like that. She thought he was just a lovely kid. When Alex grew a little bit older, he started developing a bit of an obsession with a certain killer. Andrei Chikatilo was a man who raped and killed and mutilated 52 women and children. One of Alex's friends, Mikhail, actually was obsessed with the killer too. They'd often talk about murders and they knew that they were into the same kind of thing. So Alex asked him to go and visit his dog's grave in the park, and they both drank, they talked about murdering people, until Alex actually said, "You know, we've been talking about this for ages, when are we actually going to do it? I think we should do it today." And Mikhail was like, "No, I'm not actually going to kill someone with you, why would I do that?" So Alex decided to kill him. Some reports say he hit him across the head 21 times with a hammer and then put his body down one of the sewage drains in the park. Others say that he pushed him out of a window, but I'm not sure if that report is getting mixed up with what he did to the little boy on the video. But either way, his friend was unfortunately killed by him, and that was Alex's very first murder. When Mikhail didn't come home, his parents rang the police and there was a bit of a search for him, and Alex was actually interviewed to see, if he knew anything about where he'd gone. He pretended to be just so devastated and upset he couldn't even talk about it properly, so the police just left it at that. Alex absolutely loved that he could get away with this so easily. This is another little story that is in some reports and it's not in others, but I'm going to include it anyway. It's said that Alex had a girlfriend called Olga, and unfortunately they broke up and Olga started dating another boy. So Alex decided to kill him and then a few years later Olga turned up dead in the park too. It was never put on him at the time, but now the police think maybe it could have been something to do with Alex. So for 9 years, Alex just went about normal life. He didn't really do anything bad that anyone knows about. He was still quite quiet, he didn't have many friends, and he couldn't really hold down a relationship. He had a few, but nothing massively serious. So people wonder what was so special about this 9 years. Why didn't he do anything bad? Did he decide against it suddenly? But a lot of theories say that maybe he was waiting to be the same age as his idol, and Chikatilo was 32 when he committed his first murder, so it's just a theory that maybe he was waiting until then. Alex worked in a shop and he was really well liked, polite, and his favourite book was said to be How to Win Friends and Influence People. He was still drinking in the park and he'd still invite people to come and play chess with him. He was really good at making friends and getting to know people, and he'd include them in his life by talking about his dog and saying, you know, my dog's grazing in the park, do you want to come and see it? And they'd involve him in their life by opening up a bit, and he became friends or at least acquaintances with these people. In May 2001, he invited an old band to come and sit with him to play chess and drink some vodka. Again, he started talking about his dog's grave and said, do you want to go and see it? So the man went with him, and when they were in there, he pulled out a hammer, hit him over the head and put him down a sewer pipe. In 2001, he'd killed 6 people in 1 month and 11 people in the whole year. In 2002, Alex saw a woman he vaguely knew outside the metro station, and her name was Maria. She'd gone out in the past with someone Alex knew, so he went over to her. She was crying and she was heavily pregnant and she was just really upset. So Alex decided to give her someone to talk to. She was having money troubles, she was heavily pregnant, and it was just not going really well for her. So Alex offered her a drink. He told her he had some cameras in Bitsa Park, and if she'd go and help him get them, she could take some and sell them and keep the money for herself. So this lady's absolutely desperate and agrees to go with him. When Alex got there, he said to her, they're down the sewer drain to keep them all hidden, so you'll have to have a look. When she looked down, Alex forced her into the pipe and she fell quite a long way into the water below. Maria was down there for 20 hours, heavily pregnant, in the pitch black. She was terrified, but finally she saw a little bit of light and she climbed to the opening. She wasn't able to push the thing at the top open. I can't remember what that's called, I'm so sorry. But she wasn't able to push it open. Someone passing by actually heard her calling for help and got her out. She was really frightened after all this that she would have lost the baby, but as far as I know, everything was fine. Nothing was mentioned about anything horrible happening, which I'm so thankful for. When she was in hospital, she actually said to the nurse, you need to call the police because I need to make a report. The police came to take a statement and they just didn't want to pursue her for some reason. They thought that Maria was making it out to be much worse than it was, and then they found out that she was from St. Petersburg and didn't actually have the right papers to be there, so that just completely finished them off. They didn't want to know about it, and her statement was completely thrown out and it was never looked into further. Even though Maria knew the man's name and could probably point him out, they just didn't want to know. There was also a report of a teenage boy who was quite punky, and Alex had actually took him to the park and tried to pull him down the sewer, but his coat had got caught on something. He was able to get out shortly afterwards. He went to the police, but then the police didn't believe him because of the way he looked. Then a few days later, he actually saw Alex and there was a police officer nearby. He pointed him out, but again, the police didn't do anything. In 2002, his killings continued. He went to an apartment to drink with a homeless man, and when the man started to annoy him, he picked him up by the belt and threw him over the balcony. And at the time, people just thought it was a suicide, and Alex had apparently just calmly got out the building and walked away, and no one ever suspected him. Also in 2002, Alex killed his youngest victim, who was 9, and he was a homeless boy called Mika. Alex was always really careful who he chose to kill. It was always homeless people or people who were really lonely or old, people who he thought wouldn't be missed. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, it was completely true. A lot of people didn't even notice that all these people were going missing because they had no families and no one looking out for them. These people had absolutely no one, and Alex took full advantage of that. However, Alex really liked picking people who he had some kind of connection with, which is why he really liked speaking to people at the park and getting to know them beforehand. To him, the kill was more thrilling when he knew about them. Alex started picking people from his own apartment block or the blocks next to him, and it's actually said that he killed people in every apartment block in the street. When he started going through the apartments, that's when people did start to notice people who were missing. But it didn't stop him. He wanted acquaintances, he wanted people who knew his granddad. He felt like if he could, he wanted to know the people he was killing. He said the closer a person is to you and the better you know them, the more pleasurable it is to kill them. He said that murdering people would make him feel like God, and he'd even offer them last wishes without them even knowing. He'd say to people as they were drinking together in the park, "If you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" And one man said, "I wish I could stop drinking." And Alex would say, "I promise you, today's the day you'll stop drinking." So when he started picking out his neighbours and people who knew other people, that's when everyone started to notice that people were going missing, and people started to be a bit scared to go on walks with Alex. They found it a bit suspicious, but no one mentioned it to the police. He even started to pick people with big families. A man called Vladimir was said to have left to buy cigarettes and never came back, and he had a brand new baby. In 2005, Alex decided to change what he did with the bodies after he murdered them, because in his eyes he wasn't getting enough attention and enough credit for what he was doing. And he started leaving the bodies out for people to find around the park. Although he did use his hammer most of the time, because he was drinking with these people, he'd have a weapon in hand, which was the vodka bottle. And sometimes he'd just hit his victim across the head with that. He actually really wanted to make his killings more gruesome and wanted the bodies to look more shocking when they were found. So he decided to insert the vodka bottles neck first into the holes that he'd put in people's skulls. And several victims were found laid out in the exact same way. The locals at this point were really worried about going to the park. In November, it said that Alex killed his 41st victim, which was an ex-police officer. He was found in the park too, in the same way as the others. But because it was an ex-policeman, this got the attention of the police. They realised that no one was safe from this person and no one knew who was going to be next. It seemed to be mainly men that were being killed, so they thought maybe it was a woman. In January 2006, there were 7 unsolved murders, so at this point the police couldn't ignore it any longer. They had to look into it, and they put a profile out as to what they thought the killer would be like. The police were tipped off that there was a man in Bitsa Park who was acting really suspicious. When the police came for him, the man ran away and was shot in the leg, and it turned out that after questioning, he was completely innocent. Another person was chased down in the park, and they had a hammer in the bag, and they were completely detained for about a day. So it was said that the hammer was just for protection, and that person was let go. Alex was really upset again that he wasn't getting the credit he thought he deserved, and all his killings were absolutely horrible, but this one just really gets to me. There's no need. He killed a sleeping homeless man who was asleep under a cardboard box, and he shot him with this little gun thing. I don't really fully understand what it was that was described, but it was said that it was a little pen that shot out bullets, and he just walked up to this man while he was asleep, shot him once, he didn't die, shot him again, and the second bullet killed him. And he was just asleep. In March 2006, the killings were getting so much media attention, which Alex loved. The police actually stood at the front of the park before anyone came in, questioning all the people who fit what they thought the killer might be, and they actually questioned Alex, but he was polite, he was lovely, and they didn't suspect him at all. Alex was getting sloppy now. It was almost as if he wanted people to know that it was him. He just had this secret that he was desperate to let people know, and he wanted the attention for it. And that's when Larissa and Marina's deaths come in. So as I said earlier, Alex was arrested originally for Larissa and Marina's death, and then he was arrested for 14 murders in total, but he'd confessed to 61 murders to the police. The lead investigator said afterwards, "All maniacs want to talk. It made him feel important. I told him I admired him and he liked that, and then he started opening up. It was very important for him that people think he was a hero, so I made him feel like a hero." And because of that, Alex was actually able to take the police around the crime scenes of every single murder. They knew at this point, with him confessing to so many murders, that they needed to be able to confirm that he was telling the truth. The police didn't know at this point what was true and what was him just being narcissistic and wanting to beat this other killer's numbers. But Alex took investigators around the scenes of lots of different murders, and he actually reenacted them on a dummy with so much memory that they were all really baffled by how much he remembered. And bearing in mind that he was said to have killed 60 people, he knew where people were standing, what they said, what they did, where he was standing, which blow was first, like how he did everything. So it's really obvious that Alex was reliving this constantly. He was loving it. He was remembering and savouring all of these memories of just taking people's lives. As I said before, he'd said it made him feel like God. And he was loving the attention that the investigation was given, and I think the investigators may have played into that a bit just to make him talk more. And they actually got over 40 hours of footage of him taking them around these crime scenes and reenacting all the murders and talking about them. He even led them to bodies that had been left there after murders they didn't even know about yet. And there was still a jawbone and bits of teeth all over the floor that had just been left in the park, and no one had found the person. Also, in the beginning, when he used to put people down the sewage drains, the pressure actually would rip the bodies up, so a lot of them were never identified, never found, and it's said that 13 bodies are still in that sewage system today and they've never been recovered. The police and psychiatrists determined that Alex was sane. He knew exactly what he was doing. When people aren't sane and they commit murders, a lot of the time they don't see it as being wrong, but Alex knew completely that he wasn't meant to be doing this, but he did it anyway. He wanted the attention. In Alex's apartment, they found a diary which detailed all the murders as well, and they also found violent pornography. They also found a chessboard with most of the spaces marked off with numbers. He hadn't quite filled it yet. I think he was missing about 2 or 3 squares, but the chessboard was almost full, and that had been his goal, to fill a chessboard. Although he did say that even if he had filled the chessboard, he would have probably carried on killing anyway. But that was his goal, and that's how he gets his name, the Chessboard Killer. So his aim originally was to kill 64 people to fill all 64 squares of a chessboard. So even though all of this was happening, the police still weren't sure that it was Alex who'd done it, or if he was just taking credit for someone else. They could see how determined Alex was to get the credit and attention for all these murders, so they needed actual proof. When they went into Alex's apartment, they took a hammer away from him, which he'd said he'd used in one of the murders, and they took it to examine. And on the hammer handle there were a few scratches in the plastic, and that same plastic was found in the wounds of one of the victims. It was the same particles, so that proved that Alex was telling the truth and he had committed the murders. Alex's trial started in September 2007. He had to go to court in a cage of glass, and he was pacing up and down like an animal. Again, he was really loving the attention he was getting from this. And when he was asked if he regretted anything, he just said, "Yeah, I regret that you caught me now because I was planning on killing someone else in 2 days." It's reported that he wanted to make sure he had the biggest audience he could get. He said that he liked the sound of a skull splitting, and he actually got sexual pleasure from putting things into the wounds of people. He said to the press, "In all cases, I kill for only one reason. I killed in order to live, because when you kill, you want to live." And he also said, "I felt like the father of these people because it was me who opened the door for them into another world." Again, it's this whole idea about him thinking he's God. He thinks he's amazing for doing this. After his trial that lasted a month, in October 2007, the jury came to a decision in just 3 hours, and he was sentenced to life, and the first 15 years of his sentence were to be spent in solitary confinement. So Alex's hero, Andrei Chikatilo, was convicted of 53 murders, and Alex was only convicted of 49 murders and 3 attempted murders. And he was not happy about this whatsoever. His whole aim in this was to kill more people than his idol. When he was sentenced, he actually said, "I killed 11 more people, I want to be sentenced for those as well." He was desperate to be convicted, so his number was higher, but they wouldn't do that for him. Russia found what he did so horrific that there were lots of people who wanted to bring the death penalty back just for him. But he got life in prison instead. So Alex is in prison, but he's somehow married too. In 2014, a woman called Natalia fell in love with him allegedly after watching a film about him, or a documentary, but she started writing letters to him in prison and they somehow got married. He proposed to this woman in 2016 and she just thinks he's amazing. She thinks he's like a Hollywood star and she's really proud to be married to him. I don't understand people. I did see something to do with this though. Apparently the prison didn't want him to have anything nice, and they actually forbid his wife from seeing him or speaking to him. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it definitely should be. Crazy. It's really frustrating that Alex could have been caught so much earlier on and could have maybe prevented so many deaths. I do hope the people who haven't been found yet are found and are given a proper funeral or burial. yeah, it just makes me sad that there were people who no one missed, and it's really sad that Alex knew to take advantage of that. Let me know what you thought of the case. I thought it was really frustrating and quite upsetting, but still interesting. So that is the case of the chessboard killer. I really hope you like this one. I definitely did. I hadn't looked into it properly, as I said, before doing this, so this is all new information to me. I really hope it didn't mess up too many names. I did do my best with the pronunciations. I was on YouTube I can't even say pronunciations, what's wrong with me? I was on YouTube trying to find out how to pronounce them and everything, but I'm sorry if I have, but I did my best. Hopefully you'll be able to decipher what I've said. Like and subscribe because it really helps me, and I can't wait to see you in my next one. Bye!